Fox and friends, well, we've just got some new released video of White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel weighing in on the First Amendment at last year's White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's fast. If you blink, you'll miss it. Listen.
When you think about the First Amendment, you think it's highly overrated.
You think it's highly overrated. Emanuel is joking, but is there other evidence that points to the White House thinking that freedom of speech is overrated? We're joined by constitutional attorney Mark Smith this morning. Mark, nice to see you this morning.
Hey, Clayton.
Is this just spin coming from the right that says the White House doesn't like when other people speak out against it? Isn't that politics as usual, or is there some legitimacy to this?
Oh, there's a lot of legitimacy to it, Clayton. Keep in mind that if you're already an elected politician, as President Obama is, you don't want a challenge. You don't want people like Scott Brown using things like Fox News and Rush Limbaugh's show and other outlets like the internet, basically being able to contradict the message of the New York Times editorial pages. So if you're Rahm Emanuel helping out the Democrats, you don't like the First Amendment at all because it actually allows people other than the mainstream politicians, other than incumbents, other than the New York Times New York Times editorial page, to actually have a message that people can hear. And remember, the First Amendment, at the end of the day, is all about letting people have enough information and knowledge so they can make an informed decision at the ballot box as to who they vote for and what they should think about the issues.
So what does the White House, though, do specifically to sort of combat what they might see as an encroachment from the First Amendment? Is there something that they're out there actively doing to try to subvert the other voice?
Well, I think the easiest approach is you take a look at the so-called fairness doctrine,
right,
which basically says that if you're a radio show, and you have Rush Limbaugh on, who's a conservative, for 3 hours, you must, under the fairness doctrine, have a comparable liberal voice on it 3 hours after Rush to counter what Rush is saying. And here's why the Democrats love the fairness doctrine, which is not the law, but they'd like to make it the law. It's because of what happened earlier this week with the liberal radio station called Air America, which went into bankruptcy for the second time. The bottom line is, when Americans are given a choice in the message, a choice in their information, they trust conservatives more than liberals, and that's why Rush Limbaugh makes millions of dollars and Air America is in bankruptcy.
Absolutely, and they've had financial problems for years. But isn't the argument from the other side, to play devil's advocate here, that, look, as Americans, if you're getting your information from only one, let's say you only read one opinion person every week, that's not really a smart thing to do, right? You should be getting all kinds of information from various sources and being able to make up your mind. Isn't that sort of what they're arguing here?
Well, that's what they're trying to say they're arguing. But what they really believe is that you should get your message only from the mainstream networks. You should get it from NBC, CBS, and the New York Times. And anybody other than that, frankly, isn't towing the line and is not worthy of listening to. But as we know, as you look among others, Fox News' rating, which is fair and balanced and actually hears people from both sides of the political spectrum, guess what? The White House doesn't like that because the First Amendment allows people like Scott Brown to win in Massachusetts, who would never have been able to win because no one would have heard about him but for, let's say, the Drudge Report on the internet, who actually started following this campaign rigorously, and in part because of Drudge and people like Drudge. Guess what? We now have a Republican senator from the state of Massachusetts.
Interesting stuff. Mark Smith, great stuff, and walking down the sort of the constitutional history of this, too, is really fascinating. Mark, nice to see you as always.
Of course,
thanks so much. Well, coming up here on the show, the world's most wanted man apparently back on the airwaves.